In this leadership tidbit, we're going to talk about 90% is good enough. And you're going to think about this for a second. What do I mean by 90% is good enough? Now, I'll be the first to say 90% is not always good enough. If I'm going in for heart surgery, I don't want 90%. If I'm flying on a plane, I don't want 90%. So Dr. Loden's telling you there'll be some exceptions to this rule. But what I mean by this, often at times teams will get paralyzed by overanalyzing things, trying to strive for perfection. How many times has a bride been tormented and not enjoyed a wedding because she's wanted this perfect wedding she's always dreamed of, and the flowers are not right, things are not right, instead of just going with the flow and saying, hey, I'm married, and I'm going to enjoy the process of getting married, and know along the journey it's not going to be perfect. Well, when you're planning, it's very important to understand there's not a perfect plan. You build in flexibility, you get to a point, with me, with the team I have, and the plans we have, we take calculated risks. Now, on the outside, people may be like, man, they're doing some crazy things, but it's all planned. We're not making crazy decisions. We're planning things out. They're calculated decisions. But if I can know that we're up around 75 to 80% of success, guaranteed, and then we'll have to do some adjusting along the way, we're going to do it. We're going to move forward. And we're going to have what I would call consensus. And let me say this, as a leader, you've got to understand, this will be one of the most important things you hear from me. Consensus is not everyone holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Consensus is this. When my team reaches a decision, we've already done, like we talked about in a previous video, we've had the drip campaign, we've got feedback from a lot of stakeholders, we've vetted multiple decisions, and it's important. Don't ever go, unless it's just something simple like, do I want to chew a piece of bubble gum or not? If it's a complex decision, you've got to have at least 3 options, in my opinion. If you have one option, you're setting yourself up for failure, but you vet about 3 options or more, and you dial it in, and you have your team to give you feedback. And you may have some saying, I'm ready to go. You may have some saying, I can live with it, we'll figure it out. You may still have 1 or 2 going, I don't know about this. But when you can get the majority of the people saying, let's do it, or I can live with it, we're going to figure it out, it's best for the organization. Even if you have someone saying this, you lock and load and you move forward. You go forward with it. You implement it with fidelity. And the one non-negotiable, though, is that person that does this, they better be on board with it and singing praises and doing it. If they're not going to be on an organization long. Because if you're in a leadership team, you're not going to always get your way. But consensus is saying you have a right to have your voice be heard, and we're going to vet it. We're going to build your concerns into the solution, because our team members all have valid concerns, and they have valid things that they believe are great. But once you lock in and you go forward, and 2, as a superintendent, there's times where everyone in the world sees in our community things that are happening, and they're like, well, the superintendent wants that. Well, I'm going to be honest, there's been times when I'm doing it because my board says we're going to do it. But no one's going to hear me saying that. And I put my big boy pants on and go out and we rock and roll, and we're going to implement with fidelity, because if it's a reasonable request from my boss, it's legal, ethical, moral, my board says we want to do this, we're going to figure it out. That's the way it works. You know, shared leadership is everyone working together. And at the end of the day, when you have a collective group and they all know that I'm respected, I'm valued, my voice is out there, and there are ample times where I've had suggestions have been implemented, but there's times where they haven't. But at the end of the day, you know you're valued, you're appreciated, and you can see from just suggestions from the service line, suggestions from the different staff members you have, that things have improved, things have changed. Then you'll go, man, I like working here because I'm heard, I'm valued. So that ends today's lesson. I know I had about 3 or 4 lessons in one, but the value of not being perfect, but being vulnerable and not being afraid to make a calculated decision, especially when your team's involved, is so powerful as a leader.